yields back. The gentleman yields back. The names of the Honorable Jim Jordan, a representative from the state of Ohio, and the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries, a representative from the state of New York, have been placed in nomination. Are there further nominations? There being no further nominations, the chair appoints the following tellers. The gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Stile. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Morelli. The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Loudermilk. The gentlewoman from Alabama, Ms. Sewell. The tellers will come forward and take their seats at the desk in front of the speaker's rostrum.
Okay, we are waiting for a roll call vote to begin. We will be dropping in and out to look at key votes of House Republicans that we are watching. Remember, we believe that Congressman Jim Jordan can only afford to lose 3 House Republicans, any more than that, and he will be denied the speakership on this first vote. We will have the roll call vote begin any moment. We will dip into the voting pretty quickly with Congressman Don Bacon of Nebraska, who is a no vote on Jordan, he has said, and represents a district that President Biden won, a swing district in Omaha, Nebraska, and he has said he doesn't want to reward the hardliners who have created this mess to begin with. He has said he's going to vote for former Speaker McCarthy. Every one of the time we do expect no vote. That will come fairly early. John King, what are you going to be looking for?
To see if they vote no or if they vote present. The first thing is there some tweaking of the math, if you will, some arm twisting that has convinced people to stay in their office and not vote, or to come to the floor and vote present. So as you mentioned, we get 2 pretty quick out of the box, Bacon and Buck, 2 very different men. Bacon has to run in a very competitive district, as you said, carried by he's a conservative, but he's a more of a centrist conservative. Ken Buck came to Congress as a Tea Party guy, and yet what are they both? They're both principled men who know that Joe Biden won the last election and who are governing conservatives. They're governing conservatives who want to do stuff. They want to argue, they want to debate, but they want to do stuff, and they're tired of what they consider the clown car show in their caucus. The question is, can Jim Jordan, his colleagues keep using the term bully. Can he tell people that we need to have a speaker by the end of today, so give it up? And we'll know if they give it up, if they vote present instead of no.
Yeah, it's not even about moderates versus conservatives anymore, right? It's about people who are willing to go along with the election line, people who aren't. Don Bacon is a very conservative Republican, but he's just not willing to lie about the election, Casey.
Well, Jake, I think we should kind of take a...
Wait, let's listen in, I'm sorry.
House, come to order. The roll will now be called, and those responding to their names will indicate by surname the nominee of their choosing. The reading clerk will now call the roll.
Adams. Jeffries. Aderholt. Jordan. Aguilar. Jeffries. Alford. Jordan. Allen. Jordan. Allred. Jeffries. Amodei. Jordan. Armstrong. Jordan. Arrington. Jordan. Auchincloss. Jeffries. Babin. Jordan. Bacon. McCarthy. Baird.
There it is.
Jordan.
That was Congressman Don Bacon, Republican of
Balderson.
Nebraska, as anticipated, not voting present,
Jordan.
voting for Kevin McCarthy. That is
Balance.
not what Jim Jordan and the
Jeffries.
Jordan forces wanted him to do. They wanted him to vote present, but instead he voted for
Jordan.
McCarthy. So that is essentially a no
Barr.
vote on Jordan. The next vote that we're going to be dipping in for will be
Paragon.
Congressman Ken Buck.
Jeffries.
Another nay
Dean of
on
Florida.
Jordan. His issue also different. Casey Hunt, again, not a moderate against Jordan. Ken Buck, a very conservative Republican
Yep.
from Colorado. His issue is
Elections and whether or not Joe Biden actually won the election fair and square. You know, big picture, Jake, I just think we are watching the formal installation of Donald Trump. I mean, there have been so many ways in which this has happened, but this is kind of a moment that's crystallizing it for me as the current singular entity representing the Republican Party. This is an institution whose glass doors were broken. There were gunshots fired outside this chamber. These members had to evacuate in gas masks on January 6th of 2021 when a pro-Trump mob stormed the place. And as we were discussing before, Jim Jordan was, and Jamie has reported about his involvement in that. They are now moving to install him as the Speaker of the House. And it is these more moderate, not in ideology, but in temperament, members of the Republican conference who
Fact-based.
have been fact-based,
yeah.
but they have been rolled time and time and time again over the course of the last 5 years. I mean, I started covering the Trump administration on Capitol Hill in 2017, asking Republicans when were they going to speak up, and they never spoke up.
Remember
Here we
Congresswoman
are today.
Congresswoman Ann Wagner, who was one of these fact-based Republicans, who on Thursday, when asked about Jim Jordan, said hell no, and then Monday she said she'd go along.
Right.
Let's listen in. We're going to listen in on Ken Buck.
Rakeen. Jordan. Brown. Jeffries. Brownlee. Jeffries. Buchanan. Jordan. Buck. Buck. Bouchon. Jordan. Budzinski. Jeffries. Burchett.
Okay, so Congressman Buck did not vote, but he will come back and vote, no doubt. Let's go to Dana Bash on Capitol Hill, who has some new reporting. Dana?
Well, Jake, I think that Ken Buck asking for his vote and him not being there is an example of some of what we have been talking about the sort of parlor games that go on with these relationships that do exist, even between, say, a Jim Jordan and a Ken Buck. They've been members of the Freedom Caucus together for quite some time. So we'll see if others do the same, but he's waiting, clearly. It's not as if he's not around. He's waiting clearly to see how it goes, and then potentially he's one of those who could potentially have a conversation. I'm not suggesting that he is, going to be a yes necessarily, but the fact that he didn't vote at that time gives you a sense of some of the really intense behind-the-scenes conversations that are happening, and now on the floor conversations, quiet conversations that are happening as this vote goes, and we do not know how it will end. Jim Jordan doesn't know how it will end.
Jordan. Cartwright. Jeffries. Kassar. Jeffries. Case.
The next one we're listening
Jeffries.
for is Congresswoman Chavez DeRemer
Caston.
from Oregon. She represents a
Jeffries.
district that President Biden won by 9
Castor of
points.
Florida.
Let's listen in.
Jeffries. Castro of Texas. Jeffries. Chavez DeRemer. McCarthy.
Congresswoman Chavez DeRemer of Oregon, representing
Chair
a
Phyllis McCormick.
district that President Biden won
Jeffries.
by 9 points, voted for McCarthy. That is basically two votes against Jordan. He can only afford to lose
Jeffries.
one more. Let's see what else happens. We have a few more votes before there is somebody that we anticipate will be a potential problem for Congressman Jim Jordan. But David, so far, if I were Jim Jordan, I would not be feeling good because we are only in the C's and already he has 2 votes against him. And Congressman
Jordan.
Buck has not even voted yet, and he's a pretty firm no.
I think we're waiting,
Jordan.
upcoming a couple of congressmen from Florida, Diaz-Balart and Jimenez, battleground districts, so
And McCarthy allies.
and McCarthy allies. And so, as you noted with the Oregon district, I mean, obviously, politics plays a role here. And now we know part of the pressure campaign on these Republicans to get on board is this fear that was being intimated to them of a primary challenge if you're not on board, because Jordan is such a hero of the right, of the MAGA crowd, of the dominant force, quite frankly, in the Republican Party. And so that notion of a primary challenge could cause some fear. The reality is, though, think about that. If a primary challenge is successful from the right in some of these battleground districts, those districts are at risk falling to Democrats next November, and you've got such a slim majority that it could hand the House majority to the Democrats. And so I know that long-term thinking is not the calculus today for many of these Republicans on the floor, but certainly for some of these Republicans on the floor, it's the calculus.
Jordan.
Let's go to Manu Raggio on Capitol Hill. Manu, what are you seeing where you are?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, we're told by our colleague Harry Talbot, who's in the chamber, that Ken Buck was actually not in the chamber on the floor when they called his name here. And one reason why, perhaps, is that what a lot of members have been calculating about is they've been weighing whether to vote no. They don't want to be a decisive vote. A number of these members are indicating that perhaps, Jake, that they could be no at the end of this roll call. Let's listen.
Jordan. Davids of Kansas. Jeffries. Davidson. Jordan. Davis of Illinois. Jeffries. Davis of North Carolina.
So the next one we're really listening in for is Congressman Anthony D'Esposito, a Republican of New York. He, last time we checked with him, was undecided. He is in a district that President Biden won by 15 points. He's the Republican in the most Biden-friendly district. And then right after him comes Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart, who is in a strong Trump district, but he's a no. So let's listen in. They're both coming right up.
Lasagna. Jeffries. Desjardins. Jordan. D'Esposito. Zelton. Diaz-Balart. Scalise.
So, with that vote for Steve Scalise from Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart from Florida, and the unusual vote from Congressman Anthony D'Esposito from New York for former Congressman Lee Zeldin of New York, who ran and lost a race for governor, that is 4 House Republican votes against Jim Jordan, which means Jim Jordan will not win the speakership on this vote. Now, whether that means, unless they change their votes, which will mean, again, unless they change their votes, that he will not win the speakership. Now, whether he wins in a subsequent vote could happen. That's what happened with McCarthy. It also could happen, as what happened with Steve Scalise behind closed doors, that he could find his votes eroding. There are still other votes to pay attention to, including Jake Ellzey, and this vote is not over yet, and we'll see how big the margin of defeat ultimately is. 5 votes now against Jordan. What was the one I missed? Was that Jake Ellzey? What was?
Emmer.
I didn't hear.
I was because I was.
That would have been in there. Alphabetically, that's in there, yeah.
In any case, let's continue to watch. But that's already 5 against when he could only afford to lose 3.
We should also just watch that whole present thing you heard Manu talk about in the back, if indeed they change the math here. So this is obviously 2 more Jake. He's lost 2 more votes than he could afford to lose here, if indeed everyone who's there today and took attendance that they were there is voting in this process. But we'll see if that magic number changes and if some later folks end up voting present, if we see that strategy come to fruition for the Jordan folks.
Jordan.
But John King, I mean,
Ferguson.
you know, this was basically Jim Jordan, who was the one who brought this to the floor, to force it to the floor. I want to vote. This was basically his. Remember Kevin McCarthy when Matt Gaetz said, "I'm gonna do a motion to vacate," and I think I'm quoting him correctly. That Kevin McCarthy said, "Bring it on."
Yep.
Is that what he said? Bring it on. And he got brought on, and he lost. And this was Jim Jordan doing the same thing. Steve Scalise did not bring it to the floor.
Because Steve Scalise didn't want to have to do what Kevin McCarthy did, which was keep negotiating away your power. Keep cutting deals that give away every piece of leverage, every power, every voice of authority you have as the quote-unquote CEO, the Speaker of the Republican Conference. Also important to note, this person's third in line to the presidency. This is a constitutional officer. This is not just the leader of House Republicans, whether you're a Democrat or an independent Republican watching in the country.
Good morning, Palu. It's Ryan
This is
at
a
the Victoria
constitutional
Brain
officer,
Injury
third in line to the
Society.
presidency.
Yes.
So that, the size
Hey,
of that
I'm just
box
calling to remind
matters.
you we have an
The
appointment
size of that
scheduled
VM
for
is
you
significant
tomorrow at
because how many
9:30.
people does Jim
Let me
Jordan
jot
have to
that down.
negotiate with? Right? We've heard one member wants him to come out publicly strongly say, Joe Biden won the election, Donald Trump lost, and he should stop making that case. Others want a
9:30
commitment for money for Ukraine. Others want a public
with
commitment,
Ian.
for an aid package to
Yeah.
Israel.
Let's
This would not be a
listen
problem
in.
with the
Let's listen in
Republicans.
because we got Matt Gaetz.
Thank you.
No problem. We'll see you tomorrow.
Could you give Ian a message?
Fulcher.
Yeah, I'll give you a call when I get in
No,
tomorrow. I get
no,
in
no,
at
no, no,
9, so I'll
no,
give you a call
no,
tomorrow.
no, no, no. You didn't hear me.
Jordan.
I said,
Okay. There are a
Can
couple
I
others
give
wanna
Ian
hear
a
in
message?
in just the next
Oh,
minute.
yeah.
Andrew Garbarino.
Yeah, what's the message? I can
Carlos
pass it on.
Jimenez. both
Sunday,
of them,
Sunday I was in the
are coming
hospital.
up in the next minutes. Let's just listen in.
I've been
Barbarino.
diagnosed with diverticulitis.
Zeldin.
Zeldin for Garbarino. That's
I've got
6
48
against
hours
Jordan
to
so
see
far
if the
from House
medication they
Republicans.
gave me will work.
Mike
Otherwise, I
Garcia.
have to return to the hospital.
Jordan.
48
Robert
hours.
Garcia.
48 hours starting
Jeffries.
Sunday, or
Yeah.
starting,
Garcia of Illinois.
anyway, starting yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Jeffries.
Yeah.
Garcia of Texas.
Back to hospital.
I
Jeffries.
think it's working, but very slowly.
Jimenez.
And sir, what was the diagnosis again?
McCarthy.
Diverticulitis.
Okay,
Diverticulitis.
John
No,
King, I'm sorry.
diverticulitis.
That's 7 House Republicans.
And so if
D.
you have to get that number to 2. If everybody
Diverticulitis.
keeps voting, and Jim Jordan has to get the number, not voting for him to 2.
I will, I'll look at them to get the proper spelling. But yeah, I'll let him know. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow morning. If not, I'll let him know that that might be a possibility.
If I'm not feeling good enough to make it physically,
so much leverage to the
I
rank and
can do a
file.
phone
He
appointment.
was not an effective leader.
Okay, I'll let him know
So
that
can Jim Jordan get himself
that's your
in the
right
McCarthy
option.
box and negotiate his way to
Okay.
that gavel. Now it's up to
Excellent.
eight.
Well, hopefully
If
we'll
the
see you.
answer is
Otherwise,
yes,
have
and
a
that's
great
big
rest
if.
of the day,
Capital
brother.
I, capital F,
Thank you.
boldface it and underline.
All right, take care.
If,
Bye.
what does he have to give up to get there, and how much power or authority does he have? But he called for this vote. This was his idea. This was his play, under the idea that I'm going to lose the first one, and then I'm going to win them over. I'm going to wear them down. So we will. A speaker has to run the House. A speaker has to be a legislative tactician. This is Jim Jordan's strategy and tactic. We'll see if he's any good at it.
Who was the 8th? Who was the 8th? Tony Gonzalez from Texas.
For Scalise.
He voted for Scalise, so that was one that what we weren't even looking for.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that the key potential difference here, and what I'm watching to see as they decide what to do
Braves
next
from
year, is
Louisiana.
that these 9 so far are not nihilists. The way that Matt Gaetz and company
Braves
were
from
willing
Missouri.
to essentially take the entire. I mean, they've created a situation that, let's remind
Green
ourselves,
of
is
Tennessee.
unprecedented in American history. This is now 2 weeks without a speaker of the
Green of
United
Texas.
States House because the party that runs the House took out one of their own. And the fact that those people were willing to do that speaks volumes
Green of
about
Georgia.
the way that the Republican Party has been pulled towards them in recent years. Because Jim Jordan, when he first got there, was called a legislative terrorist by John Boehner because he was willing to go very much not that far and those people followed in the mold. The reality is, I don't think these 9, like, they are people that want to govern the country, and they need a speaker to govern the country.
I just want to bring in, David, I'll come back to you in one second, but I want to bring in a couple former Republican members of the House,
Jordan.
if I can, Rodney Davis and Adam Kinzinger, just to get their take on this, because frankly, I'm a little surprised at the depth of the votes against. This is a higher number than I thought we were going to get. Tony Gonzalez and Kay Granger voting against Jordan, I did not anticipate.
Jordan.
Frankly, I like being surprised. It's always this is one of the reasons we went into journalism, to be surprised. Let me start with you, former Congressman Rodney Davis. Are you surprised at the number that we have so far? 9 votes against Jordan, and I think we're just in the J's, and we know we have more to come.
Higgins of New York.
Or we're in H's.
I am
H's.
surprised.
Yeah.
I am surprised. I didn't think this many people would vote against him during the first round. I thought it would be an easy vote for many of my former colleagues to be able to appease the far right in their districts and say, hey, we supported Jim during this round, but all bets are off in future rounds. But I think you're going to see somewhat of a more cascading effect. Members of Congress can count, and they realize that he's not going to be speaker in this round. And I think, frankly, he's got one more round to try and gather up the votes, and then I think all bets are off on who's going to be nominated next.
Congressman Kinzinger, what's your take?
Yeah, it's the same as Rodney's. Basically, look, once they hit 3, then I think a lot of these people that were staying quiet got permission to go no. I know at least there's one more that's going to be a no. Very likely Steve Womack of Arkansas, and probably others in there. I'm surprised by this number. But I can tell you, I heard a lot of names of my former colleagues that said Jordan after their name was called that I know feel dirty inside for it and are now very jealous of these 9 who had the courage of their convictions. But all this whole thing, Jake, is about getting people on the record so they can now go to Fox News and pressure them as hard as they can. I don't think he gives up on the second round unless he starts losing more. The pressure is going to get intense, and that's how they always play it.
All right, let's listen in.
Jackson Lee. Jeffries. Jacobs. Jeffries. James. James. Jayapal. Jeffries. 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 Johnson of Georgia. Jeffries. Johnson of Louisiana. Jordan. Johnson of Ohio. Jordan. Johnson of South Dakota. Jordan. 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 Joyce of Ohio. Joyce of Ohio. Joyce of Pennsylvania. Jordan. Cam Lager Dove. Jeffries. Captor.
All right, we continue to watch the vote. If votes continue as they are and everybody stays where they are, Congressman Jim Jordan will not secure the speakership on this vote. People do change their votes sometimes. We'll see what happens. Congressman Tom Kean of New Jersey just voted for Jim Jordan. That is one of the Biden districts, and he is a moderate, so that is a victory of sorts for Congressman Jordan in his aspiring speakership, but it will not be enough, at least not as of right now. Let's go to Dana Bash on Capitol Hill with the latest. Dana.
Jake, I just want to underscore something that you just heard, we all just heard from former Congressman Adam Kinzinger, which is why that others number keeps climbing. And it is largely because once it was clear that Jim Jordan would not get the votes on this first round. Some members, some vulnerable members, some angry members are taking, it goes up to 11 now, are taking what they call up here free votes, meaning they know that their vote does not have a consequence at this point when it comes to whether or not Jim Jordan will be speaker. So they are trying to make political calculations.
Jordan. Kim of New Jersey. Jeffries. Krishnamurthy. Jeffries. Custer. Jeffries. Kustoff. Jordan. LaHood. Jordan. La Lota.
So as we continue to listen to these votes, I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. The other thing I just wanted to add is I was just told by somebody who is helping Jim Jordan that some of these, again, these free votes, these votes that are climbing on the others column, the 12 column, do intend to support Jim Jordan on the second round. The question, of course, is whether there will be enough. Whether there will be enough of them. And we are continuing to look at this list of 18 Republicans in 5-1 districts to see how they are going to go and how they calculate
Larson of Washington.
whether they vote for somebody who they maybe don't agree with on many
Larson
things.
of Connecticut.
Let's listen.
Jeffries. Latta. Jordan. Laturner. Jordan. Lawler. McCarthy. Lee of California. Jeffries. Lee of Florida. Jordan. Lee of Nevada. Jeffries. Lee of Pennsylvania. Jeffries. Ledger Fernandez.
Who was the vote? Who was 13?
Jeffries.
Who voted?
Lesko. Jordan. Letlow. Jordan. Levin. Jeffries. Liu. Jeffries. Lofgren. Jeffries. Loudermilk. Jordan. Lucas. Jordan. Lukemeyer. Jordan. Luna. Jordan. Luttrell. Jordan. Lynch. Jeffries. Mace. Jordan.
As
Magaziner.
we continue to listen to this roll call vote and know that it looks like the outcome is clear, although we should emphasize that any of these members can change their votes.
Manning.
And it is very, very possible if you think about what we saw back in January during the vote for for Kevin McCarthy. I want to
Jordan.
let's listen to Kevin McCarthy's vote.
Jeffries. McBath. Jeffries. McCarthy. Jordan.
Significant
McCall.
moment there. Kevin McCarthy putting his vote in
McLean.
for Jim Jordan. I want to talk to my experts here, and Doug High, I want to start with you because, again, you were somebody who worked for House Republican leadership. As you see these votes, and now it's up to 13 voting for somebody other than Jim Jordan, what does that tell you?
It tells me that he's not getting through in this ballot, and it tells me that we're going to see Republicans at some point today going to a room called HC5, which does not sound very glamorous. It's not very glamorous.
It's not.
It's a meeting room in the basement, and that's where the Republican conference meets. And this is where Scalise will have the opportunity, and indeed the need, to press those members to vote against him. Excuse me, Jordan, to press those members who voted against him. They're going to hear from their constituents. They're going to hear from conservative leaders, but they're also going to hear in that room, and that's going to determine if a vote 2 happens, does he get more members or less members, which will tell us how the rest of it goes.
I want to bring in David Axelrod, who is also with us. David, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I've been listening to this conversation from the beginning about how this could be that a guy who voted, a guy who was an election denier and has the history of Jordan could be so close to the speakership. He may not get there, it appears. And you know, the answer is this is the Republican Party. This is the party that Donald Trump is the runaway front runner in for president of the United States. 70% of the Republican voters are also election deniers and believe that there was something amiss in the last election. So he really reflects the base of the party, and that's point number 1. Point number 2 is the first principle for most legislators, and I love Adam Kinzinger because he was willing to do his duty and he put it ahead of his own political well-being. That is unusual. There's a reason why that book, Profiles in Courage, was a slim volume, okay? That's not what politicians do. They first calculate what they need to do to remain practicing politicians and get reelected. And so the pressure campaign, while it may not succeed for Jordan, has been pretty effective. 55 people were against him going into the weekend, and you've got a little more than a dozen now. Now, he may not get there, and as Casey Hunt mentioned before, there are members there who are institutionalists. There are members there who really are moderates and care very much about the appearance of what's going on now and the reality that the House can't function. I wouldn't be surprised if Jordan can't put this together in the next few ballots, that there is going to be a move to get the House open by perhaps giving more authority to the Speaker pro tem. You know, because I think those people know it can't go on, and the Republicans can't seem to agree on anyone. Patrick McHenry's broadly popular. It wouldn't shock me if that happened here, but as to the first part, Jim Jordan is the face of the Republican Party as the Republican Party exists today.
Scott Jennings, Jim Jordan, the face of the Republican Party, of your party?
Well, I mean, literally, he's the face of it. He's on Fox News every night. If you consider that the people who are on TV the most, the people that Republican grassroots hear from the most, who is it? They hear from Donald Trump. They hear from Jim Jordan. I mean, those two guys, you know, far and away.
It used to be that those kind of Republicans didn't even get close to the Speaker's chair, much less within inches of the gavel, and that's what we have right now. In this round, no, it's not going to happen. But it might happen in the next round or the next round after that.
Yeah, as a strategic matter, what I am interested in is whether Jordan moves for an immediate second ballot to see if some of those people peel off and get down to the actual number of holdouts. So is it somewhere south of 10, say? And then when does he actually feel like he has to go into a conference room, as Doug was talking about, and sort it out with those people? So this is more than I would have thought. And a question, and a couple of members have said to me, this is more than they would have thought already. And so, are these people real, or are they gonna? Is this just a one-round protest? That's the math question I have.
I just want to bring in Lauren Fox, Lauren, I know you've been talking to your sources about the dynamic here, which is important to underscore, because the last time we saw something like this was in January. Kevin McCarthy was trying to woo the hardline conservatives, or the, never Kevins, or whatever you want to call them. The dynamic that is happening right now, what Jim Jordan is trying to do, is convince so-called moderate Republicans, even though many of them are really conservative, but Republicans who are from Biden won districts, swing districts, to support him. What are you hearing about how those conversations have gone, given that 13 that we see there?
Yeah, one of the things that Jim Jordan really tried to do was come out with a plan for how he was going to deal with the government spending deadline that was coming up on November 17th. He walked into conference a couple weeks ago and made it clear that he wanted to basically leverage a expected 1% cut that will go into effect in April to try and get some negotiations with the White House to cut spending. And a lot of Republicans argued that they were happy to see that Jordan had a plan at all. They felt like he had some concrete steps he was planning to take. And the reality is, with the votes we are seeing, including a surprise from Kay Granger, who is the chairwoman of the House Appropriations Committee, it's clear that that did not really assuage some of the concerns from Republicans. And part of the reason it may not have worked is because that 1% cut that was voted into law in the debt ceiling bill, it's coming up in January, would take effect in April, and it scares defense hawks because that is a 1% cut that would have a massive effect on military preparations. And if you remember, many years ago, Congress had this same fight over what they then called an across-the-board cut. It was known as sequestration. It was a huge problem for the Defense Department. And so that is clearly becoming a problematic step here. And that is maybe why you're seeing people like Kay Granger, the key appropriator, voting against Jim Jordan on the floor. Dana?
So interesting, Lauren. Let's keep listening in.
Jeffries. Ruppersberger. Jeffries. Rutherford. Scalise. Ryan. Jeffries. Salazar. Jordan. Salinas. Jeffries. Sanchez. Jeffries. Santos. Jordan. Sarbanes. Jeffries. Scalise. Jordan.
As we watch the House floor and as we watch these not Jordan votes number climb to 14 now, I'm getting some texts, and I don't know what you all are hearing. I got a text from a former Republican who said, a former House Republican who has been in situations like this, who said, you know, if it was just a handful, maybe Jordan can do it, but it looks so much harder now as the numbers go up. Actually, I know that could be the case, but again, people could be looking at this and saying, I'm just going to vote the way I want to right now. But a lot of these members that we're talking about are Republicans who people in your party, in the Democratic Party, think that they can beat and take the majority back in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, if this number was a handful, I would feel better probably as Jim Jordan, but this is much larger than I think anyone has suspected. And it is a presidential year, and we were talking earlier about in midterms, a vote like this, some folks in their campaign could think it would really matter. But here's the one thing, in those 18 districts that Biden won but are held by Republican congresspeople, some of those are in states where you don't run very large presidential campaigns, like a New York, like a California. Or Nebraska. And so when you are thinking, my constituents aren't going to be focusing so much on the presidential because my state is a really red state, but my district is purple, and I need to make sure that I don't get a campaign ad run against me in a moderate district where I voted for someone like Jim Jordan, who is the founder of the Freedom Caucus, is an election denier, and is always on Fox News pushing MAGA talking points.
And I just want to add that Mike Simpson just voted for Scalise, which is a bit of a surprise, Scott.
Yeah, the number keeps climbing, and so I think, interestingly, by the way, when we did this with McCarthy, they had to go on and do it, and they had to keep doing it because the Constitution requires it. In this case, there is no requirement they stay here and do this over and over and over again. So I'm actually really sort of fascinated now if you're Jordan. Is the strategic move for you here to go for another one and see if anybody peels off, or is it to go to to a meeting. On your point about the presidential election, look, Donald Trump's on the ballot. And so, to me, if you're going to try to peel off voters in one of these districts with an ad, it's not going to be about Jim Jordan. It's really going to be about Donald Trump. If this were a midterm, I would think this might be a more consequential vote, which is why I've been a little skeptical that the pressure campaign that they have been thinking they were going to run is going to be as effective. I think the presidential vibes next year are really important, and it just is a blanket over everything, including, how you voted on a leadership.
I think it's an and. It's not, it's I would run an ad with Donald Trump and Jim Jordan and say this is the MAGA party.
Doug, hi, I just want to tell our viewers that Victoria Spartz is from Indiana, who, by the way, was Ukrainian born. She, like Ken Buck, did not vote. She was not there. It's not that she's not here, she did not vote.
Well, one of the things that's really interesting, what we're seeing, is that a lot of these no votes, or whether they're voting for Scalise or McCarthy, is really the rise of the House appropriators. And why have we had government shutdowns and a lot of the chaos over these past few years? It's been the failure to have a working appropriations process, which isn't terribly sexy, but is what Jordan has said he's going to try and do. And obviously that's been on hold for a while. But if I could say one thing, a lot of this conversation has been Jim Jordan and Donald Trump. And Donald Trump calls Jim Jordan. This all predates Donald Trump by years. This is the Tea Party election. This is the pick of Sarah Palin. Eric Cantor, my old boss, primary loss. The 2013 government shutdown. Staffing decisions that Steve Scalise made against Jim Jordan. There's a whole lot going on here, and we're talking about a coal mine that is filled with canaries. Donald Trump just came and was the great disruptor on what already existed.
In the last couple of weeks, interestingly, tactically I'm fascinated by this. When McCarthy realized he didn't have the support, he gave in. When Scalise realized he didn't have the support, he gave in. Jim Jordan does not have the support right now, but they have signaled they will not relent. So we're now down to the third most popular guy in this line. And as a tactical matter, they have at least signaled publicly they will not give in no matter what. It's just an interesting mindset departure. McCarthy relents, Scalise relents. If Jordan doesn't relent, it does give you sort of a window into how sort of these conservatives think about how politics works.
McCarthy relented after he had been Speaker for 9 months.
But he didn't say, well, let's.
But he did this times 14.
But he's not out here campaigning for the. He didn't keep campaigning for the job when he realized he didn't have the votes. Jordan here lost in conference to Scalise, and now he's on the floor losing this vote. It's just interesting to me to see whether he sticks with it or not when these other two guys didn't.
I mean, maybe not once they voted McCarthy out, but let's rewind to January where he did continue to pursue. To your point about strategy right now, I don't think you go for another ballot immediately with 15 and the votes are still being counted.
Yeah.
Because to Doug's first point about the alphabet, we got to 3 really early on in the alphabet when they were calling the roll. And so if you get to 3 in an immediate next ballot on C's or D's,
creates a momentum perception.
It's a perception that you can't get it done, and then you go caucus, and then you run the risk of then having to make concessions that
C's and D's, leave my report card out of it. But the initial plan from Jordan was to go to conference and after the first ballot. But I think this becomes part of where the Republicans find themselves. Every time Manu talked about Jordan today, he used the word fight. And so often over the past 10 years, fight came before strategy. We need to see now, what is Jim Jordan's strategy? We know he's going to fight, but does he have a strategy to land a punch, to win a round, and to win the speakership?
Well, we know that Jim Jordan knows how to fight. Right. That's how he made a name for himself. The question is, who is he fighting, Jake? And how is he going to win the fights when you have people who are very, very reluctant in your own party, as he is, to make you Speaker?
Yeah, well, right now there are 15 House Republicans who are a no on Jim Jordan, and I suspect we might have one more no when all is said and done. Let me go back to our 2 former House Republicans, Rodney Davis and Adam Kinzinger. Congressman Davis, your take on this as this vote comes to its ignominious end?
Well, it's on to round 2, and then is there going to be a round 3, a round 4? I think there's absolutely no way that you have enough Republicans in that conference that, like a few months ago on behalf of Kevin McCarthy, will stand strong and say only Jordan, like they did when they were only McCarthy. As I said earlier, I think Jim Jordan has one more round to prove that he can get the votes. If I were him, I would call everybody back down to HC5, get them in a room and try and hash it out. Going right into a second round, I don't think behooves him, and frankly, I think gives him less of a chance to achieve his goal of getting the gavel.
Congressman Kinzinger, hold on one sec, because I just want to listen in. We got one more no vote from Congressman Steve Womack of Arkansas. Let's just listen in to the chaos and confusion as Republicans try to figure out what to do next, and Democrats try to suppress their giggles. We do anticipate that some of the people who did not vote will be asked if they want to come up and vote. There are a few notable individuals who did not vote when they were called upon to do so, including Congressman Ken Buck, perhaps most notably. So let's listen in on that. And then, of course, a big decision for Congressman Jim Jordan. Does he want to go to a second vote and see if he can convince some of the 16 holdouts to change their votes? He's going to have to change 13 of the 16. So let's listen in.
The House will come to order. The reading clerk will now call the names of the members who did not answer the first call of the roll.
Bilirakis. Bilirakis. Buck. Emmer. Cardenas. Jeffries. James. Cole. Joyce of Ohio. Jordan. LaMalfa. McCarthy. Sparks. Massey.
Okay, so the opposition to Jim Jordan picked up 4 votes there. He had 16 originally, and then in the absent votes, Congressman Ken Buck voted for Tom Emmer. Congressman John James of Michigan voted for Tom Cole, and Victoria Sparks and Congressman LaMalfa all voted for candidates other than Jim Jordan. That's 20 no votes on Jordan. Adam Kinzinger, David Chalian was making this observation earlier, which is what we seem to be hearing very much in a loud voice is from these 20 congressmen is, please do not make Jim Jordan the symbol of the House Republicans.
Yeah, that's correct. Look, I'm impressed that there's 20. I was worried this morning because a lot of the hard opposition to Jordan had been capitulating in the last 24 hours. I think of like Mike Rogers from Alabama, Ann Wagner from Missouri. They were hell-nosed until they were all in. This is embarrassing for Jim Jordan. And I think this is going to be hard for him to fix. I mean, the only thing I can imagine is if he starts cutting deals, and those deals include things that he's never supported in the past. For instance, if he says, I'm committed to bringing Ukraine funding on the floor, he may be able to peel off one or two of those. If he says, I'm committed to whatever it is, I don't know. Maybe he can get to his number, but I think this is hard. I think the free vote here, I mean, you know, the easiest thing to do if you're a Republican is to vote for Jim Jordan the first time and then go away the second time. So I think you could see even more peel away on the second round, or he consolidates. Who really knows? But I think it's going to be very hard for him to become speaker now. But that doesn't mean they're not going to use blistering pressure on Fox News, Newsmax, all those OAN to activate the base, to scare the crap out of these people. But there are a lot of brave people in those 20 that I'm very proud of today.
20 no votes against Jim Jordan, at least in this first ballot. Dana Bash, I guess the question is, where do we go from here?
The question is, where do we go from here, Jake? Because this is, despite the understanding that he was going to lose a fair amount in the first ballot, I just got a message from a Jordan ally saying, quote, this is much worse than we expected. So, despite the bravado, despite what Jim Jordan himself said to Manu umpteen times in the hallways over the past 24, 48 hours about the fact that he can get there, he not only didn't get there in the first round, but they expected to do better than losing 20 fellow Republicans, as they have done.
Yeah, no, indeed. This is a lot worse than I expected he would do. We knew going into the vote that he had 6 no votes. We did not know there were 20, and he certainly lost people that weren't even on our list of people to watch. People like Congresswoman Granger and Congressman Gonzalez. Yeah. Manu Raju, you have some reporting from the Hill. What's going on?
Yeah, the expectation is that Jim Jordan will try to get go to another roll call vote here. We'll see when exactly he does this, but this is worse than they anticipated. Remember, Kevin McCarthy on that first ballot back in January lost 19 Republicans. The expectation going into this vote from people familiar with the Jordan camp thinking was that they would do better than Kevin McCarthy on that first ballot. They lost 20 votes right here, and in talking to members who are walking off the floor, the belief is that this was worse than they expected. They thought they'd be able to get closer. They thought that perhaps some of these members, they were surprised about where they ultimately came down. There's some concern among some of the New York Republicans about how Jordan would deal with a parochial issue involving state and local taxes. That is an issue that's very important for the deductions of those state and local taxes. It's an important issue from those New York Republicans in swing districts. They all voted for former Congressman Lee Zeldin to be the Speaker of the House. Can they win some of those members back? The belief some of the Jordan folks is that perhaps they can win back some of the people who voted for Kevin McCarthy, but some of the other ones could be much harder to win back here. But even despite this worse outcome than they anticipated, they do expect this to go to a second ballot. But how much more ground can he make up? That is still a huge question as we head into another period of uncertainty and the Republican turmoil only continuing here, Jay.
Well, and I think it's a fair question. I mean, it's possible that he will win over some votes from these 20. It's also possible that there were people that, you know, not to be impolite about it, that were holding their nose and voting for him that might now be emboldened to say, you know what, you had me for the first ballot and I don't want to go with him on the second ballot. We can do better. We can vote for a Tom Emmer or a Kevin McCarthy or a Tom Cole or any number of individuals. And John King, I don't think that, I mean, I certainly am not representative of the House Republican Caucus, but the House Republican members of the conference that I've spoken with who have voted, some of whom have voted for Congressman Jordan today, are not particularly excited about him.
No, they're not. And so this is roughly the McCarthy math, right? He has to change, 18 votes here. McCarthy was ultimately able to do it. He took a pummeling to get there, and he gave away just about everything in the store to get there. But but he was a much less, for all the faults people would give you about Kevin McCarthy and his own family, much less polarizing than Jim Jordan. A lot of these Jim Jordan votes, they say they're held no. We'll see if they hold. But I just want to make a point. The Speaker of the House runs the institution. Yes, the Speaker of the House has a majority leader and a whip whose job on a daily basis is to count the votes. But when you hear Jordan people saying this is worse than we thought, which tells you they failed test number one of being a leader, which is being able to do the math of your team. If you want to pass Ukraine funding or you want to deny Ukraine funding, if you want to give aid to Israel, if you want to get House Republicans to have get a majority of Republican votes on some plan for anything, they have to keep the government open in the short term. You have to be able to count votes. You have to be able to lead the institution. You have to be able to look some people in the eye and say, I know you want to vote no. You have to take one for the team today. Jim Jordan failed on this first ballot. He failed that test. Now, so did Kevin McCarthy. We will see if he can recover. But again, Jordan is much more polarizing among the no's than McCarthy was.
And it really says that there are fewer people who are afraid of Jim Jordan than the Jim Jordan camp really thought. I mean, I think that one of the big differences between the way Jim Jordan and Kevin McCarthy operate is that Jordan is not afraid to make people angry. Kevin McCarthy does not like to make people angry, although he is certainly willing to pick up the phone and let you know he is angry in certain circumstances. He prefers to give you something you want so that you'll back him when he needs you to back him. Jim Jordan's not that way. He has more of a reputation as a bully, and this shows that people are basically daring him to do that. And I think that means if he is going to continue with this, it's going to get ugly fast.
I think we also have to take into account what a surprise this vote was. One Republican source said to me, he's no Nancy Pelosi. This was not the whip count that they expected. One source said this is going in the wrong direction and he thinks he's going to lose more. We don't know that yet. But this was not what Jim Jordan and his allies expected.
And his mission is totally different than Kevin McCarthy's mission in terms of the content of the deal making that needs to happen, what Kevin McCarthy did back in January. John, you said Kevin McCarthy gave away the store, literally gave away so much in the deal making that he's not Speaker of the House anymore. I mean, that's exactly what he gave away. He gave away the job that he was fighting for in that very first day that he became Speaker. Here, so McCarthy was all about having to woo the Gateses of the world and the right flank, sort of a familiar pattern between the establishment and the insurgent wing of the Republican Party that had been playing out for years and years and years that we had seen. This is a totally different thing. This actually looks a little bit more like when legislation is being debated, right? And you need to win over some of the folks whose political interests may not be aligned with the majority and how you do that. To Casey's point, that's not Jim Jordan's wheelhouse. That is not, Jim Jordan has never sort of had to operate in that kind of space. And so for a lot of these folks, yes, the fear of a primary can matter. It can dampen their base even in competitive districts.
Let's listen. I'm sorry, they're gaveling.
The House will come to order. The tellers agree in their tallies that the total number of votes cast is 432, of which the Honorable Jim Jordan of the state of Ohio has received 200 votes. The Honorable Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York has received 212 votes. The Honorable Kevin McCarthy of the state of California has received 6 votes. Lee Zeldin of the state of New York has received 3. The Honorable Steve Scalise of the state of Louisiana has received 7. The Honorable Mike Garcia of the state of California has received 1. The Honorable Tom Emmer of the state of Minnesota has received 1. The Honorable Tom Cole of the state of Oklahoma has received 1. The Honorable Thomas Massey of the state of Kentucky has received 1. No person having received a majority of the whole number of votes cast by surname, a speaker has not been elected. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess subject to the call of the chair.
All right, well, I guess they're not going to call a second vote. Good times. Joining me now, Republican Congressman from Florida, Carlos Jimenez. Congressman Jimenez, thanks so much for joining us. You voted for Speaker McCarthy, former Speaker McCarthy. So you were one of the 6 to do so. 20 of, well, I guess 19 other Republicans joined you in not voting for Jim Jordan. That was a bigger number than I thought there were going to be. 20 House Republicans voting for someone other than Jim Jordan. Were you surprised?
Yeah, I was surprised. I thought it was going to be like between 7 and 15 or so. When it got to 20, yeah, I was a little surprised it was that high. But I always knew, I was pretty sure. I mean, just in the circle of people that I've talked to, that you know, more than 5 were going to vote for somebody else. And so, yeah, the fact that it's 20, it's a little surprising to me. Yeah.
So some of it obviously was resentment towards the individuals that have forced this mess upon your conference to begin with, the individuals, not only the 8 who voted against Speaker McCarthy to begin with, but also the others who have voted against rules, the others who have voted against the government funding bill and the like. But I also sense that there are people in the Republican conference that just don't want Jim Jordan to be the symbol of House Republicans. Is that your sense as well?
Look, I want Kevin McCarthy to be the symbol of us. He was our leader. Look, we may have had 8 Republicans that lit the fire, but also there was 208 Democrats that provided the gunpowder. So there's nobody without blame here. What we need to do to rectify this is just go back in time and rectify the injustice that was done 2 weeks ago. So my vote is with Kevin McCarthy, and it has been. I've been very direct. I'm there. I'm still there. I'm not changing my vote. I think that, and I said after Friday that Jim Jordan has a really steep hill decline, and I don't think that hill has just gotten any less difficult. There's 20. I know there's folks that are saying, hey, I'm with him for 1 round, but after that they're kind of like a free agent. We need to find somebody. Look, I think the right person is Kevin McCarthy, but this conference, first of all, we need to give you know, McHenry, Patrick McHenry more power so we can open up the people's house. There's no reason why the people's house has to stop because of one individual. And I'm not just talking about now, I'm talking about the future. We have an incapacitated speaker. All of a sudden, yeah, that's it. We're not going to do anything for a month, 2 months. That doesn't make any sense, and no organization works that way. We need to rectify that. But eventually, we will find a speaker, somebody we can rally around. My hope is that it's Kevin McCarthy. Hopefully we can draft him, get him back. But if that's not the case, we need to unify around somebody that we all respect and can move forward, move this country forward.
So do you think there will be a movement in the House Republican Conference to give temporary Speaker Patrick McHenry temporary powers so there can be movement? Because as you point out, this is the first time in the history of this great republic that we have not had a speaker, and the legislative branch is just at a standstill right now when there are 2 major wars and going on right now, and a government that's about to run out of money.
Well, I'm going to correct the history. I believe there has been some times when we've had some periods of time without a speaker. I think there was one time we had like 100 ballots, and there have been a couple of months maybe without. But that was way in the past. That's something we need to rectify. We need to rectify it now. And yes, I would hope that my fellow Republicans and actually the entire Congress sees that there is a need to put somebody to give expanded powers to conduct the people's business. I would hope that we would do that. I know that there's resolutions already drafted to do that, and so I hope that we do that. And then we as a conference need to get together and find that individual. My hope again, it's Kevin McCarthy, but find that individual we can rally around and move forward.
Last question, sir. You said you'd like to go back in time and get rid of that vote to get rid of Kevin McCarthy as Speaker. Obviously, we are out of flux capacitors, and we cannot go back in time. So who do you think might be a candidate that your caucus can finally get 216, 217 votes? There were votes today for Tom Emmer. There was a vote for Tom Massey. There was, I can't go through every one of them because there were, I think, about 6 candidates. Lee Zeldin, your former colleague, was there. Is there somebody that your caucus can rally around?
Yeah, there's somebody there. Look, we have 220 members. Some very, very talented individuals. They're very smart, very capable individuals. And my hope is that, you know, maybe the 5 different caucuses can get together and come up with a name, all right, that they can all agree to, that we can all rally around. I don't want to put a name out there because then, oh, that's Jimenez's guy. No, I don't want to do that. It needs to be our person, not one person's person. So, and I'm saying guy, it could be a gal. I mean, it could be, you know, maybe make history, have the first, female Republican Speaker of the House, and so there are a lot of talented people here that I could support. Right now, my support lies with Kevin McCarthy, and then let's see where it goes in the future.
All right, Congressman, thanks so much. Let me throw it to Dana Bash.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it. Joining me now is Republican Congressman Ken Buck of Colorado. He did not vote for Congressman Jim Jordan, instead voting for Tom Emmer. Well, I guess my first question is, do you really want Tom Emmer to be Speaker?
No, I don't. I don't like Tom Emmer. I figured this would be the worst job in America. Mike Rowe would not want to do this for his TV show. This is a terrible job.
Okay, so just to underscore that, you voted for somebody because you don't like them.
I voted for somebody because I wasn't going to vote for Jim.
Yeah, but you don't. It's not because you want him to be Speaker. Okay, well, that says a lot about where we are right now. Let's look at what's next. I should just say, so our viewers know, that you were one of the 8 who voted to vacate and to kick Kevin McCarthy out of the Speaker's chair. You just heard Congressman Jimenez talking to Jake, saying that he does want McCarthy back. Is there any chance that you will have a change of heart?
I'm not going to vote for Kevin McCarthy. As Carlos also said, we have 220 members, 221 members. We're going to find somebody to agree to and move forward, even if it's for a temporary basis, but we will find somebody so that we can get our work done.
What happens now?
Yeah, well, right now, folks are going to go into conference. There's going to be a lot of yelling and screaming. I will go into conference after they nerves settle down a little bit, and I think we come up with either the 30-day plan, or Jim wants to go back to the floor for a second vote. If we get a second vote, Jim is going to lose some votes that he got on the first vote, and he's going to gain some votes. But I anticipate that the vote will still be in that 15 to 25 range.
Was the 20 votes effectively against Jim Jordan a surprise to you?
No. No, it wasn't a surprise to me. I was surprised that some of the whip counts that were floating around on social media had it down to 6 or 7. I think that was just wishful thinking on some of the staffers' parts. There is a group of people, and really widespread across the conference, that do not want to see Jim Jordan as Speaker.
Well, yeah, when this happened with Kevin McCarthy, and he eventually did get the votes back in January, the people he was trying to convince were mostly from the Trump wing. I think it's probably, I know that's generalizing, but it's not the kind of people that Jim Jordan is trying to lobby right now, which are largely the moderates, present company excluded. What does he have to do? Talk about the challenges and the desires and the pressure points that he's under. I know for you in particular, it's multiple issues, right? It's spending, it's about Ukraine, it's also about election denialism.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had a nice 30, 40-minute conversation with Jim last night. It is not personal. I have a lot of respect for Jim, and we both have sort of risen in the conservative movement and share many of the values of the conservative movement. I think that what Jim Jordan needs to do is to stop talking about defunding the Department of Justice. We pride ourselves on being a party of the rule of law. You can't defund the Department of Justice or defund a special counsel's office in the Department of Justice and talk about the value that we share. So there are a number of different issues related to the election and some not related to the election.
You are a hard no? I mean, is there anything that he can do, anything that he can promise, any change that he can make to get your vote?
I will not vote for Jim Jordan.
No way. Yeah, no way. Okay. And you talked about the 30-day plan. If Jim Jordan decides that either he decides he's going to go back and do a second vote, even a third vote, and doesn't ever get the votes, the idea that you're talking about here is to give Patrick McHenry, who is the temporary speaker right now, more power?
So he's a temporary speaker without any powers. He cannot bring a bill to the floor and pass a bill. So it would be to make him a speaker with full power for a limited period of time so that we can go into conference and find a speaker and at the same time run the House the way the House should be run. I frankly think it would be a bipartisan vote to make something like that happen.
You think so?
I do.
You think Democrats would support that?
I do, and I think while Patrick has said that he is not interested, he evidently had some calls about would you run for speaker and we would support you. He's not interested in a coalition government, but I think it would send a very strong message to America and the world if both parties came together for a 30-day speaker.
Well, you just mentioned sending a message to the party and the world. What message do you think that they're getting right now? 2 weeks in, no speaker. The Middle East is on fire. Ukraine is a problem. There's talk. That's not even to mention China and other issues globally.
What do I think the message is?
But the message is, yeah.
Yeah, I think the message is quite plain and simple, that the House is not running right now. I think that the fact that we have not received a supplemental request from the White House at this point means there is not an emergency. It's urgent, it's important, and we will get it done. But I don't think anybody in the world looks at our House or Parliament or any other legislative body and expects to see everything neat and tidy. This is not.
Well, this is far from neat and tidy.
And I think it is chaos, but it is. If it wasn't, I'd be more concerned about our democracy.
Congressman Ken Buck, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Jake, back to you.
Thanks, Dan. Now let's go to a major story developing right now in Gaza, what the Palestinian government is calling a war crime. The government in Gaza says the Israeli Defense Forces struck a hospital in the center of Gaza City, Al-Ali Baptist Hospital. Preliminary estimates from the government in Gaza put the number of killed in the strike somewhere between 200 and 300. We expect there are many more innocent people still trapped under the rubble. The IDF says they're looking into reports of the incident. It remains unclear to them right now, they say, if the hospital was struck by Israeli warplanes or by a failed Hamas rocket launch. Let's go straight to CNN's Clarissa Ward, who is in Israel in the town of Ashkelon. Clarissa?
Yeah, Jake, we have heard nonstop sirens basically for the last few hours, that in response to this horrifying strike on this Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital. That is a hospital in Gaza City that is in the northern part of the enclave. Thousands of people were taking shelter there from the continued violence. Many people were being treated there. Some of them couldn't be moved despite evacuation orders that have been in place. And as you mentioned, we are hearing initial estimates of at least 200 to 300 people killed in that strike, and many, many, many more feared dead. Now, Hamas is calling this a genocide. Hamas has vowed to avenge it. As I mentioned before, I'm wearing my body armor again because we have had a series of sirens and rockets coming into, not just here where I am in Ashkelon, but in other parts of Israel as well. But certainly a dramatic and horrific intensification of violence, Jake, right on the eve of President Biden's visit here. Not clear where this goes from here. You mentioned IDF said that they are looking into the incident, that it could potentially have been a Hamas misfire, if you like, of a rocket. We've had a look at a couple of videos that we're not ready to share online yet, but certainly it looked like an enormous blast. Hard to see how that would have been a misfired rocket, but certainly we are waiting to get more clarity on this and fearing that it's going to be a very long night ahead with many more rockets and much more violence in the wake of this awful strike, Jake.
All right, thank you so much, Clarissa. Let's bring in Anderson Cooper, who I believe is in Tel Aviv with the latest. Anderson?
Jake, yeah, we are just hearing more about this, as you've been hearing from Clarissa. I don't have much more information than what she has said. The spokesperson for the IDF, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, has said that the IDF is looking into what happened. Obviously, you've heard the statement that Hamas has made, calling it a genocide, calling for other nations. Let me give you the exact wording. I'm not going to read the full statement. It says the international community, Arab and Islamic countries must bear their responsibility and intervene immediately now and not tomorrow to stop the aggression and the fascist army of the occupation and hold them accountable. So obviously, more remains to be seen. Some sort of an explosion at this hospital. According, the death toll is high, hundreds killed, according to Hamas officials on the ground. What we have seen, certainly in the past, is either an Israeli strike or an accidental strike, intentional or accidental, or a Hamas rocket launch that then falls short and lands, killing civilians, which we have also seen in past conflicts. So at this point, it is still very early. We're trying to gain more information on the ground, Jake.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is always a very difficult situation because right now we have reports of hundreds killed, and there's no reason to doubt that, but we don't know what caused it. We don't know who caused it. We don't know the situation under which this happened, and we're trying to bring the best information we can under the worst circumstances there are. So we will bring that as we can. Obviously, reporting from Gaza is all but impossible right now for most news organizations because it is under constant bombardment.
That's right, and look, you know, there are many examples of Hamas rockets firing, falling short, killing civilians that then gets blamed on Israel. There are also many examples of, of civilian deaths caused directly by Israel. There's no doubt about it. The bombings that we have seen in Gaza have been at a level that we have not seen, certainly in all the time that I've been covering the conflict here, going back into the 90s. So, again, we don't have the information on the ground. It remains to be seen exactly what occurred, but it seems a huge civilian loss of life, a huge loss of life in this hospital, hundreds, according to Hamas officials. And again, trying to gather more information.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to Clarissa Ward. Clarissa, tell us about the location of this place, Gaza City, the Al-Madani Hospital in Gaza.
So it's the Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital. Ma'amdani just means Baptist. It's right in Gaza City. This is in the northern part of Gaza, right, Jake? This is the area that Israeli forces had urged Gazans living in to evacuate. And we have seen over the course of the last few days, according to the UN, some 600,000 people in the north of Gaza move into the south. Now, today what happened is that there were a number of strikes in the south, in Khan Yunis, also in Rafah, which is right by the border crossing with Egypt. And what that did for many people is, who were in the north, who were planning or trying to get to the south, it made them basically stop, right? Because they were scared that it isn't safe in the south. They were also concerned about the dire humanitarian situation in the south. And so a lot of people who we've been speaking to today are just too afraid to leave their homes. And many of them are living in shelters. It appears that in this Al-Ahli hospital, you had a lot of families who were basically sheltering, who had been displaced from their homes or who were fearful that their homes were in potentially dangerous places. And this is something you see a lot in Gaza. People flock to hotels, hospitals, any foundation that they basically think will be a safe place. We don't know exactly how many people were there. There is, obviously a lot of numbers coming in, and what Anderson has said is true. It is very difficult to determine, especially in the early hours after an event like this, what exactly is happening. It is particularly difficult when there's no electricity, when there's limited fuel, food, things of that nature, and it's a very chaotic situation on top of it. So even with regards to knowing precisely how many people were killed, is that estimate based on how many people were in the building? Is it based on how many people have actually been identified? These are questions that we will be asking, and we will just be getting answers to in the coming hours going forward, Jake.
Yeah, and Clarissa, it's Anderson in Tel Aviv. Let's talk a little bit about the situation in the south of Gaza, because we have seen hundreds of thousands of residents of Gaza City and elsewhere in the north moving further south, heeding warnings by the IDF, which took place several days ago. They've given a 24-hour warning. That sort of time limit has certainly passed, but we have seen continued flow of people down into the south. But the situation, as you've mentioned, for them is very precarious still in the south. There are still airstrikes going on in the south. It's not as if that is not a zone in which there are not still areas being targeted, correct?
Well, and I think that's a big part of the problem, Anderson, because if you're trying to kind of market the South as a place of refuge where people should evacuate to, but there are continued strikes and there is no aid coming in, you're essentially taking away people's incentive to try and move to the South. As I mentioned, the UN said 600,000 have already moved. I mean, to give our viewers some perspective, I think the population of Oakland, California is roughly 400,000. That is a huge amount of people in a very tiny area. The UN has said that they're completely overwhelmed at this stage, that all the shops in Gaza have enough food for maybe 4 or 5 days. The hospitals now have said that they are no longer able to operate effectively. We have heard from doctors who say that they are performing operations with no painkillers. They are running out of drugs. The water is such a critical issue, Anderson. There's no water. We are again hearing reports from our own producer on the ground of people taking water from the toilets and boiling it so that they can give it to their families. This is clearly not a sustainable situation, and yet here we are 10 days in, and there is no consensus yet on trying to open that Rafah border crossing to allow the free passage of aid. The Egyptians are blaming the Israelis and saying it's because of the strikes. The Israelis are blaming Hamas. Hamas is blaming Israel. And in the meantime, as is so often the case, hundreds of thousands of civilians are suffering in absolutely dire situation. And, perhaps more importantly as well, it is stopping the flow of people out of northern Gaza because they see what's happening in the south. They see that it's not safe. They see that there is no respite for them there. And so they are choosing to stay in their homes, which then leads you to a situation where you have more high casualty, catastrophic events, possibly like the one we have seen take place at the Al Ahli hospital.
And Clarissa, the situation for Americans who had been told days ago to go down to the south, to hang out, go as close as possible to the Rafah border crossing if, in case and when it opens up, it's quite remarkable that we're now more than a week into this, and there are still hundreds of Americans trapped in Gaza.
So by the U.S. Embassy in Cairo's count, they are in touch with 253 Americans who are desperately trying to get out of Gaza. I think you can be assured that the number is probably even higher than that. CNN has spoken to some of them. They have been pleading and imploring anyone who will listen to help them try to get out. And as you point out, again, the problem is that many are heading down to areas like Rafah, right near the border crossing, to try to be in place to leave as soon as there is an opportunity. And this morning you had a series of strikes there. And so that only contributes to even more chaos, even more confusion, even more fear. Americans say that they've been trying to get more information on where they should go, when they might be able to cross. We know, Anderson, of course, that the flurry of diplomatic activity has been intensive behind the scenes. Secretary of State Antony Blinken flying around the region, sitting down with everyone, trying to build consensus around the establishment of some kind of a humanitarian corridor. Yesterday, coming out after his 7+ hours meeting with the Israeli War Cabinet and saying that a tentative plan had been agreed upon to basically construct some kind of a humanitarian zone in the south. But then you look at the events of today, you look at the crippling paralysis of the international community to resolve this issue, and you have to wonder, Anderson, when realistically such a humanitarian zone could possibly be constructed and under what sort of circumstances, Anderson?
And just to sum up, Hamas officials in Gaza saying 200 to 300 people have died in a strike on Gaza hospital. They are blaming Israel. Israel has said that they are looking into what occurred, raising questions about whether it was, in fact, some sort of intentional Israeli strike, errant Israeli strike, or something to do with Hamas and a rocket being fired out and a shortfall of the rocket, which we've seen in the past. We cannot say for sure what exactly has caused this, but according to officials, Hamas officials, Palestinian health officials on the ground, 200 to 300 people believed to be dead at this stage. We're just learning about this. We'll gather more information and bring it to you when we can, Jake.
Thanks, Anderson Cooper. Appreciate it. Anderson Cooper in Tel Aviv, and Clarissa Ward in Ashkelon. We will do more reporting on the ground in Gaza and in Israel and report back to you when we know more. In the meantime, let us turn back to the big story here in Washington, D.C., the race for a speaker. As you may recall, Jim Jordan challenged his fellow Republicans to vote, and he came up short, getting only 200 votes when he needed 217. Let's go back to Manu Raju on Capitol Hill, who has the latest. Manu, my understanding is that Congressman Jordan is going to push for a second ballot and is pressuring people who voted against him to vote for him. What's the latest?
Yeah, I'm told by multiple Republicans that Jim Jordan is in fact meeting privately with some of those holdouts right now, trying to allay their concerns, trying to convince them to vote for him or vote present, which could change the threshold, could make it easier for him to be elected speaker. Those conversations are ongoing. But Jake, I talked to several Republicans in the hallway here who voted against him just moments ago, and they're making clear that they don't plan to vote for him on the second ballot as well. One Congressman John Rutherford just talked to our colleague Sam Fossum. He said, I am where I am. He said, I'm not going to change his position. Same with Mario Diaz-Balart, who's a Florida Republican who voted for Steve Scalise. He also is indicating that he is not moving up his opposition. Carlos Jimenez, who you spoke with, also indicating that he's not going to move from supporting Kevin McCarthy. That right there, just 3 votes there. There are more that are expected to vote against Jim Jordan on the second ballot as well. There was some positive news from Jim Jordan. One Congressman, Doug LaMalfa, who did not vote for Jordan on that first ballot, indicated he would on the second ballot. So maybe some movement in the direction, but not enough movement. So there's just a lot of questions about the timing of everything. I've talked to a bunch of Republicans. They're not sure if there's going to be a conference-wide meeting or if they will go to a second ballot. They've just closed the doors of the House chamber, so don't expect a second ballot to happen imminently. Even if it does happen at some point, it may not happen for some time later today. But Jordan is still working behind the scenes, trying to convince members to come his way. But this number, this margin, 20 Republicans voting against him, that is much worse than they anticipated. They thought they were within striking distance. Jordan allies even thought they were within 10 votes of the speakership. They thought they were better than McCarthy did in January when we lost 19 Republicans on that first ballot. 20 Republicans, a significant deficit for him to make up. But they are still trying to push ahead, still planning at the moment to have that second ballot election, and he still has some support from his allies, including Kevin McCarthy himself, who told me Jordan should not drop out at this point. So Jake, a lot of questions as Jordan tries to get the votes, convince his members to come along, and decide when to pull the trigger for that second ballot. For the moment, he doesn't have the votes to be elected speaker.
All right, Manu Raju, thank you so much. Casey Hunt, let me start with you here in studio, and then I want to bring in former Congressman Rodney Davis. He's going to push forward. I'm sure he'll be able to pick up a couple votes. But once again, I do think it's pretty clear, and I don't mean this to sound harsh, but it's just a mess.
Yes.
I mean, this is not normal. If you don't have the vote, I mean, we have not seen this before.
Nope.
Because normally, the person who is going to be the leader of the party has the votes lined up long before they call the vote, and you don't see this sloppiness.
Yeah, I'm glad that you sort of hit on the big picture, historic nature of what we're seeing, because this is now 2 weeks without a speaker, second in line to the presidency of the United States, 2 wars, as you've noted, and no one able to send any American money to help, despite the fact that we're sending the U.S. president to Israel tomorrow to address it. And Republicans cannot get on the same page. And honestly, it's the end of a story that we have been covering in slow motion for the last 5 years, or honestly 10 years, since the Tea Party first came to Washington, 13 years in 2010. This is something where there is now a faction of the electorate that is voting for chaos. And these members, there's an incentive system that is set up for them inside the conservative media that makes it impossible for a certain set of them to oppose that MAGA base. And then you have a handful still, the ones that make up the majority, who are in districts where their voters actually want them to govern, and they cannot find common ground. I mean, Jake, how many times have you said this in this afternoon, right? How do you find common ground on who won the election and who didn't?
Right.
It's like this or that. It's not in the middle.
Right. Former Congressman Davis, what's going on with your party? Like, I mean, this is just aberrant behavior. This is not normal. I mean, they should just be able to. I mean, what's wrong with Tom Emmer? What's wrong with Steve Womack? What's wrong with Tom Cole? These are all conservative Republicans that should just be able to, like, I mean, if you can't rally around Kevin McCarthy, just pick one of these guys.
Well, look, this started a few months ago when I was with you through 15 rounds of votes. And really what you're seeing is people within the Republican Party, within the Republican conference in the House, have decided enough's enough. They watched 8 individuals decide to take down Kevin McCarthy. And I actually right now, Jake, I think Jim Jordan's making a tactical error in trying to talk to these no votes one-on-one. He needs to get every member of that House Republican conference into the room, because his best supporter and his best sales pitch is coming from the guy in the room everybody stands up and listens to when he gets to the microphone. And that's Kevin McCarthy and other supporters like Patrick McHenry. He needs to use them to try and get these no votes to change. And if he doesn't do that, I don't know how he's going to get any more votes in the second round and may lose a few more.
All right, Congressman Rodney Davis, thanks so much. This hour, we're closely following 2 major stories: uncertainty in the House after Republicans say no to yet another speaker candidate. This time it's Jim Jordan. And in Israel, what the government in Gaza is calling a war crime, a hospital devastated with the number killed believed to be in the hundreds. We'll have more breaking news after this.
Delivers the marketing tools your small business needs to keep up, excel, and grow. Constant Contact, helping the small stand tall.
This bakery needs new equipment fast to keep up with demand, so they're going to OnDeck, the online lender that makes it easy to choose your loan, and if approved, get funds as soon as the same day. Your loan is on deck.
The first time you made a sale online with GoDaddy was also the first time you heard of a town named Dinosaur, Colorado.
From Dinosaur, Colorado.
Start an easy-to-build, powerful website for free with a partner that always puts you first. Start for free at GoDaddy.com.
Jack used to have gum problems. Now,
it's Swisher time.
He uses TheraBreath Healthy Gums mouthwash to help fight gingivitis for 24 hours.
And it's not burning, so that heat's coming from you.
Like TheraBreath mouthwash.
It's a better mouthwash.
Moderate to severe eczema still disrupts my skin. Despite treatment, it disrupts my skin with itch. It disrupts my skin with rash. But now, I can disrupt eczema with Rinvoq. Rinvoq is not a steroid, topical, or injection. It's one pill once a day. Many taking Rinvoq saw clear or almost clear skin, while some saw up to 100% clear skin. And they felt dramatic and fast itch relief, some as early as 2 days. That's Rinvoq Relief.
Rinvoq can lower your ability to fight infections, including TB, serious infections and blood clots, some fatal, cancers, including lymphoma and skin cancer. Death, heart attack, stroke, and tears in the stomach or intestines occurred. People 50 and older with at least one heart disease risk factor have higher risks. Don't take if allergic to Rinvoq, as serious reactions can occur. Tell your doctor if you are or may become pregnant.
Disrupt the itch and rash of eczema. Talk to your doctor about Rinvoq.
Learn how AbbVie can help you save.
Attention, Medicare has expanded Dexcom coverage for people with diabetes.
If you have diabetes, getting on Dexcom G7 is the single most important thing you can do. It eliminates painful finger sticks, helps lower A1C, and is covered by Medicare.
Before using the Dexcom G7, I was really frustrated. My A1C was stuck.
Dexcom G7 sends your glucose numbers to your phone or Dexcom receiver without painful finger sticks. The arrow shows the direction the glucose is heading, up, down, or steady. And because Dexcom G7 is the most accurate CGM, you can make better decisions about food, medication, and activity in the moment.
After using the Dexcom G7, my A1C has never been lower. I leave line dancing 3 times a week, and I'm just living a great life now.
It's so easy to use. Dexcom G7 has given me confidence and control that everything I need is right there on my phone.
Now millions more are covered by Medicare. Take advantage of the expanded coverage by calling today.
I brought in Ensure Max Protein with 30 grams of protein. Those who tried me felt more energy in just 2 weeks. Here, I'll take that.
Ensure Max Protein. 30 grams protein, 1 gram sugar, 25 vitamins and minerals, and nutrients for immune health.
Closed captioning is brought to you by Page Publishing. Want to publish a book? We'll review your manuscript for free.
If you've written a book, Page Publishing can help you through the process. We cut through the confusion of the publishing world to make it easy for you.
Call 800-563-0741.
Welcome back. We're following two major stories here, neither of them particularly comforting. Here in the United States, a House divided again amidst continued House Republican divisions. Congressman Jim Jordan tried and failed to secure the speakership on the first ballot. We'll have more on that in a few minutes. Continued chaos and disarray among House Republicans, and the United States still does not have a speaker for the first time, to the best of my knowledge, ever. But first, we're going to go to Israel and Gaza, where hundreds are reportedly killed at a hospital in Gaza that is still on fire. Video we're just getting into CNN shows rescue workers pulling people out from under the rubble. Mahmoud Abbas on the West Bank has declared 3 days of mourning. The Israeli Defense Forces say that it is investigating exactly what happened and has no details to share at this moment. It is unclear exactly what happened, except right now, something very horrible. Let's get straight to CNN's Clarissa Ward. Clarissa, what do we know for a fact right now, and what are we looking into?
Well, we know for a fact that there has been a horrific incident at the Al Ahli Baptist Hospital in Gaza City in northern Gaza. That is the part of Gaza that Israeli forces had ordered people to evacuate from as early as Friday. We don't know exactly yet what caused the incident. It does appear to have been some kind of a massive strike, though, from preliminary videos that we are starting to look through. The Palestinian Health Authority is saying that at least 200 to 300 people have been killed, and you are already seeing a massive reaction from Palestinians inside Gaza, Hamas calling it a genocide, also from Palestinians in the West Bank, declaring 3 days of mourning, flags to be flown at half-mast. And certainly we have also been seeing a much more higher level of rockets coming in to Ashkelon in just the last couple of hours. There's been sirens at least several times and several barrages of rockets, and all of this leading to fears of a real intensification of violence on the eve of President Biden's visit to Israel. From what we're seeing and hearing, it's very clear that there's going to be an incredibly strong reaction to this hit on the hospital. Again, it will take some time to work out exactly what has happened. It is late at night. There is very little electricity. It is challenging to find exact numbers for how many were killed and how this happened. But what we can say is that, according to a number of reports on the ground, thousands of people were seeking refuge in this hospital. This is something that's very common in Gaza, Jake. When you have intense Israeli bombardment, people tend to flock to hotels, hospitals, mosques, and shelters because those places are largely considered to be safe. So a lot of families will go and literally often sleep in the hallways of hospitals or hotels, wherever they can find. That appears to have been the case at the Al Ahli Baptist Hospital. We're hearing there were also people being treated. Now many of them are being moved, along with obviously the dead and the wounded, to the Al Shifa Hospital inside Gaza City. And all of this coming at a moment of protracted suffering for Gazan civilians who are facing what the UN has called an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe. And of course, as Israel has urged people to leave northern Gaza and move south, these types of strikes and the ferocity that we have seen in the south, there have been a lot of strikes too, which is where Israel has been pushing people towards, has really left a lot of people paralyzed. We've spoken to families who say that they don't want to move. They're too scared to move. They don't want to even leave their houses. So clearly horrific day in terms of the death toll, now well above 3,000 Palestinians killed. And we are just trying to put together a better picture of how exactly this happened, Jake.
All right, Clarissa, thank you so much. Appreciate it. The Palestinian Ministry of Health says that this particular hospital was sheltering thousands of displaced people who had been evacuated from their homes in Gaza City, as Clarissa was just suggesting. Joining us now to discuss, the former Air Force Colonel for the U.S., Cedric Leighton, as well as CNN national security analyst Kim Dozier. Thank you so much to both of you. Cedric, look, I know that there are people out there who think that there's just one easy answer that we can just share right now, but obviously in a situation like this, it's not that simple. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right, Jake. One of the key problems that you have is, what was being targeted? Was this in fact an Israeli airstrike? And of course it looks like that was really the case. And when you have a situation where there are a lot of civilians, it really complicates the targeting mechanism and the whole targeting process. So I would really like to know, from a military standpoint, what the Israelis were targeting. Did they think that there was a Hamas entity in the hospital? And even with that, what kind of justification would there be to do this kind of a strike? It's something that is, really different from how we do the targeting process in the U.S. Air Force, at least it appears to be, and that is something that I think really has to be investigated. And I think it also puts a kind of a break on what the Israelis are doing right now in terms of their offensive operations. They will find it difficult to continue these operations if these kinds of mistakes, if that's in fact what happened, continue to occur.
I want to warn our audience right now, it's 2:35 p.m. in the East Coast, so this is a time when kids might be watching television. We're going to bring you some video from Gaza right now of the hospital. It is rather graphic. It is the scene of what happened, and there are people who have been wounded, people who have been injured in the fire. So just know that is what you are looking at, these images coming in. Kim Dozier, you have covered war zones before, and so often there are so many questions and that we don't know, and in the fog of war it is difficult to answer. So first of all, so many things to keep in mind. One, this latest spate of violence began with Hamas attacking Israel 2 Saturdays ago, something to remember. Two, obviously the Palestinian-Israeli conflict did not begin 2 Saturdays ago. Three, if Israel in fact did strike this hospital, and we don't know that to be the case as of right now. 4, sometimes Hamas does misfire and blame it on Israel. 5, Israel is bombing that part of Gaza right now. 6, sometimes Hamas does embed within the population. I mean, there are so many things we do not know. The one thing we do know is that innocent people in Gaza are being hurt and are being killed.
And Jake, what those images add up to is a mass casualty event that could change the international opinion of what Israel is doing right now. It could shift international opinion against them. It's already shifted that opinion in the Arab world against Israel. And Israeli news channels are still covering hostage families. Arab news channels are covering the destruction inside Gaza. But this is a denied area, so Israel, international investigators, we can't get in to see what brought that structure down. Remember, Israel's also trying to target the subterranean weapons storage caches, rocket launcher facilities, and Hamas has a pattern of having those types of things stationed near civilian areas.
When you say subterranean, let me just translate for folks at home who are not familiar with that word. Hamas has an intense, complicated, rather sophisticated tunnel network under Gaza, sometimes under homes, under apartments, under hospitals. I'm sorry, please.
Yeah, absolutely. They've bragged of having 300 miles of tunnels beneath Gaza City, beneath other parts of the whole territory. Israel and the U.S. have tried to use new technology to map those tunnels, but Israeli officials have admitted to me they don't know the whole structure. So they're trying to smoke fighters out of some of the entrances, and they're hitting multiple targets related to that. Is that what brought this structure down? It won't matter to people in the Arab world. The young generation of Arabs watching this, growing in anger against what Israel is doing, and that's going to make it harder for Egypt, say, to open its Rafah border crossing to allow aid in. It's going to make it harder for all Arab leaders to do what President Biden will be asking them to do in his visit tomorrow, to show some sort of cooperation with Israel that helps the Palestinian people.
And Cedric, it is under this circumstance that President Biden is getting into Air Force One and flying to Israel. It's already a circumstance under which his U.S. Secret Service detail must be grinding their teeth. I mean, if it were up to U.S. Secret Service, presidents would never leave the White House, much less go to war zones. But I cannot imagine how upset and worried they are right now. And Israel's national security minister, Ben-Gvir, who is rather hawkish, would be a charitable term. He just wrote on Telegram, said that, quote, the only thing that needs to enter Gaza are hundreds of tons of explosives, not an ounce of humanitarian aid, unquote. A rather hideous thing to say, given all of the innocent civilians, innocent Palestinians suffering in Gaza. What do you make of that?
Yeah, indeed, Jake. I think the real problem for President Biden is going to be to try to cool as best he can everything down, and that's a really tall order. He was already confronted with an almost impossible task by coming into the Middle East, especially into Israel, and during this situation. And his stated purpose, with at least part of his Israeli visit, is to take a look at the strategy that the Israelis are proposing and the kinds of tactics that they're going to be using in order to achieve that strategy. This kind of a situation, if it is indeed something that goes back to what the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, have been doing, then it really not only complicates things, but it also calls into question the entire mechanism in which the Israelis are actually prosecuting this war. How they're doing it, how careful are they? The idea of humanitarian areas, humanitarian corridors, that kind of thing would really need to be worked out. Should have been worked out way before this, but this really underlines the fact that there are a lot of missing pieces here, and that's the kind of thing that really needs to be fixed before we have more civilian casualties like this.
And Kim Dozier, just to underline something that I thought is important when I was interviewing an Israeli official the other day, the Israelis regard this as an existential threat to Israel, and especially when you look at the Hamas charter, which calls for the destruction of Israel, and you look at the unbelievably horrific attack on Israel 2 Saturdays ago, I raised the issue of civilian casualties with the Israeli official, as I have every time I've interviewed an Israeli official since that horrible day, October 7th. And the Israeli officials, one Israeli official said to me I think it was Saturday or Sunday, I can't even remember, and said, I'm sure that there were innocent Germans too. That is how they look at this.
Absolutely. For them, they're worried about a two-pincer fight being hit not just by rockets from Gaza, but rockets from Hezbollah in Lebanon in the north. Hamas has openly declared that it wants to wipe out the state of Israel. So has Iran. Israelis feel like this could escalate into something where every single Israeli in every part of the country is threatened. And when I try to ask the same question you tried to ask, they get angry. They're like, yes, it's bad, but that's where the enemy is, and the enemy needs to be wiped out.
All right, Kim, Cedric, thanks to both of you. Appreciate it. We're going to go back to Israel as we learn more details on this horrific hospital strike. Again, we do not know at this hour who is responsible for that strike. We will find out as much as we can and bring that information to you as soon as we can. Coming up next, what is the next step for Congressman Jim Jordan after he failed rather ignominiously to win the gavel on the first ballot? Is there a path forward? We're going to go live to Capitol Hill. That's next.
Teeth sensitivity is so common. It immediately feels like somebody's poking directly on the nerve. I recommend Sensodyne. Sensodyne toothpaste goes inside the tooth and calms the nerve down. And my patients say, you know, doc, it really works.
From pep in their step to shine in their coats. When people switch their dog's food to the farmer's dog, the effects can seem like magic. But there's no magic involved. It's just smarter, healthier pet food. It's amazing what real food can do.
From summer loves to fall flings. So many ways to save. Life ready, wallet happy. That's 365 by Whole Foods Market.
New projects means new project managers. You need to hire.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. When you sponsor a job, you immediately get your short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job criteria. Visit Indeed.com/hire and get started today.
DirecTV Sports Central gives you access to every game, but Terry doesn't have DirecTV. Come on, work with that. Here. Now, you can find the game easy. Barbecue is saved!
Visit DirecTV.com for up to a $400 reward card.
My barbecue is ruined.
Meet Gold Bond Daily Healing, a powerhouse lotion that moisturizes, heals, and smooths dry skin with 7 moisturizers and 3 vitamins. And new Gold Bond Healing Sensitive, clinically shown to heal and moisturize dry, sensitive skin. Gold Bond.
Bathfitter is a better way to remodel your tub. Precise measuring means the perfect fit. The Bathfitter tub-over-tub process means no mess or stress. A custom-made tub and seamless wall mean a watertight fit. Premium acrylic means it lasts a lifetime. And all this together means a great value. Bathfitter, it just fits. Visit bathfitter.com to book your free consultation.
At Consumer Cellular, our customer service team is based here in America.
America?
America.
From sea to shining sea.
Beautiful.
Okay, everyone. Our mission is to provide complete balanced nutrition for strength and energy.
Ensure with 27 vitamins and minerals, nutrients for immune health, and Ensure Complete with 30 grams of protein.
This is American infrastructure. Megawatts of power, rails and open road, and essential services of every kind, all running on countless invisible networks, making it a prime target for cyber attacks. But the same AI-powered security that protects all of Google also defends the systems running America's infrastructure. For these services, for the 336 million of us living here.
The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper is appointment viewing on Sunday nights. One whole story, one whole hour. The world's best journalists dig deeper into the stories they can't ignore. The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper, Sunday at 8 on CNN.
Stop! I'm a good zombie!
This October, spirits come home to rest all month long.
This place is really haunted. What a weird history.
With Hollow Scream on Disney Plus.
We're gonna scare you. Boom.
Home is where the hunt is.
It's time.
And many more. You're never obligated to join a plan, so don't wait. Call for a free Medicare coverage review today and see how the licensed insurance agents at Plan Enroll can help you find a plan that's right for you.
Super Beta Prostate is the #1 urologist recommended prostate supplement. And now you can find it in every Walmart nationwide. Don't ignore your prostate health. Get Super Beta Prostate.
This is CNN, the world's news network.
Welcome back to CNN Special Live coverage. 2 stories rippling across the globe right now. One, graphic scenes in Gaza City where a hospital was caved in, killing hundreds and stranding an untold number under the concrete. It is unclear right now who is responsible for the strike and for what the Palestinian government brands as a war crime. The other story is happening right here where we are on Capitol Hill. Jim Jordan wants the speaker's gavel, but after the first vote, it appears there is no clear way he will get it. I want to go right to CNN's Manu Raju. Manu, I know you've been speaking to sources about what's next. What are you hearing?
Yeah, Jim Jordan plans to press ahead.
even though at the moment he is still short the 217 votes he needs to be elected Speaker of the House after losing 20 Republicans on that first vote. That first vote, he can only afford to lose 3 Republicans, but nevertheless, he is still planning to force a vote. A spokesman just put out a statement saying the House needs a Speaker as soon as possible. Expect another round of votes today. It's time for Republicans to come together. Now, it's not clear exactly the timing of this vote, but we do know that Jordan is leading behind the scenes with those holdouts, trying to convince them to come his way. I've heard from a couple of them that indicate that they are open to supporting him on the second round, including Congressman Doug Lamalfa, who said that he wanted to vote for Kevin McCarthy in the first round to register his opposition to the way that McCarthy was pushed out. But he said now is time to get behind the House Speaker. Another one, Congressman John James of Michigan, has indicated some openness to voting for him on the Jordan on the second ballot after not voting for him on the first ballot. But there's a significant amount of ground to make up, and there's a real risk, Dana, of other Republicans who voted for Jordan but only did it tentatively, did it even though they weren't totally sold on him, voting against him if this continues to drag out because they want a new candidate. Congressman Vern Buchanan of Florida, someone who initially supported Jordan's initial rival to replace Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise. Buchanan voted for Jordan, but I asked him moments ago about whether he would stick with Jordan if this continued to drag out. He was not certain yet. That was still an open question for him, and that's going to be an open question for others. So if Jordan pushes ahead, doesn't get close to the 217 votes in the second ballot, expect some calls from some of the members to step aside, to allow another candidate to put his or her hat in the ring, given that no one has been able to get the 217 votes needed yet to become Speaker of the House, and leaving this House completely paralyzed, effectively shut down, unable to act on any legislative business for the last 2 weeks after the historic ouster of Kevin McCarthy. So even though that is still that is what Jordan is trying to convince his members to come in line, saying, look, we can elect a speaker today, come and support us, we can get the House moving again. But at the moment, he has a ways to go down into getting the votes, even as he plans to press ahead on the second ballot. We'll see if he decides to do it on the third ballot if he falls short yet again.
Yeah, losing 20 votes, as we've been reporting, was not what he expected. He expected if he was going to lose that first vote, it would be by far fewer numbers. Thank you so much for that reporting, Manu. I want to go now to our Melanie Zanona, who is outside of Jim Jordan's office, rather. He is huddling, Melanie, with the people who are trying to help him find the votes in a very frenzied way. What are you learning?
Yeah, Dana, I am outside his office, but Jim Jordan is not in his office. We are told, though, that he is in the Capitol as we speak, and he is having those critical meetings with holdouts, trying to win them over. Now, it is unclear, though, at this point, what he can offer some of these members to get them to change their support. As Monty was mentioning, there is real concern that some of the people that voted for Jordan on the first ballot might start to bleed their support and vote for someone else on the second ballot. So the question now is whether Jim Jordan can really show progress. But to just give you a sense of the problem that he is facing here, some of these members, like the New York Republicans, for example, they cited some of Jordan's past record on voting on critical issues that are important to New York. And for example, he voted against aid for Superstorm Sandy. He voted against healthcare funding for 9/11 first responders. Those are issues that were very important to these centrist Republicans, a key voting bloc in the House. Republicans who really handed the GOP the majority last year. And it's unclear whether Jordan can assuage those concerns. These are things that he voted against, and it's not clear whether he can convince them that he is ready to govern and lead. So we'll see what he's going to do in these critical meetings. But in a sign of hope, there are some other members who voted against Jordan on the first ballot who are now signaling that they might be willing to flip. But at this point, if Jordan is not able to make progress in the second round, a lot of Republicans are doubting that he's ever going to be able to get there. So a critical few hours here, Dana. It's unclear if they're going to have a conference-wide meeting. At this point, we're expecting just one-on-one meetings. And then at some point today, we are now expecting a second vote. Dana.
Okay, Melanie, thank you so much for that reporting. My panel is here now. And Doug, I was talking to somebody who is close to Jim Jordan, who said that yes, he is going to, as we just heard from our colleagues, push for a second vote, but it doesn't mean that the whip count, that the work that he's doing to change minds is going very well. It's, at this point, perhaps more about his brand as a fighter, and that he can't just give up after the first vote. It's something we were talking about here privately, but it is actually something that is very much on the minds of not just Jim Jordan, but the people around him.
Yeah, we know the whip count didn't go well. Obviously, the margin was a lot larger than they thought it was going to be, and some of that was probably whip projecting, telling people what they wanted people to believe. But if that had been 8 or 10 votes, then the Don Bacons and people like that who said a sliver of our conference shouldn't be able to hold the House hostage would then be that sliver of the conference, and they would have been in a very strong position. 20 is a big number, and it means why we all are doing one thing Democrats and Republicans all do is hurry up and wait to see what that next vote's going to be. That number's bigger. It's going to be a lot harder for Jim Jordan moving forward.
Yeah, the brand you mentioned of being a fighter and also of being supported by Donald Trump, not someone who gives up easily. I'm not surprised they're going to go to a second ballot here, because to have given up after the first ballot would have been to have totally folded, when for years you've gone out and told Republicans that we just have to keep fighting and we never give up and we don't stop in the face of political adversity. So the momentum is the key. If it stays about the same, or he only picks up one, or if he loses one, you wonder how much the conference will tolerate. How many more attempts will the larger rank and file tolerate, when a lot of these people didn't want to get rid of McCarthy in the first place. They then were with Scalise. Jordan is far from their first choice, and so how much leash do they give someone like this if they're not showing progress on this next immediate vote?
Yeah, I find it hard to believe that on the next ballot, if he doesn't get under 10, how do you go to a third? At 20, it's already so large. You have to really knock that down. He can only afford to lose 3, and so if you can't get under 10, I don't know what the endurance of the caucus is, but I will say that on the contrast, my Democratic friends are remaining united and have continued to double down on the call that if we can't find something, if the Republicans can't get their act together, why not try a bipartisan path forward? Well,
there's a third option, and that's being floated as a temporary speakership remaining with Patrick McHenry, who most Republicans not just like, but really respect.
Which is becoming an option that more and more Republicans in that building behind us are talking about. Jim Jordan, as we've been just talking about, he did not have the votes as we saw in the first round. It doesn't look like he has them in what we expect to be a second round. We are expecting that to happen. A lot of high drama here as that Ohio Republican vows to keep fighting. Also, of course, we are following the horror in Gaza as hundreds are dead inside a packed hospital. Much more on the breaking news right here on CNN after this.
Sidney Crosby just continues to boost because he has a great hockey mind. Detroit's a dangerous team, and they're looking to make that next step. It'll be a fun game.
Penguins Redwings tomorrow at 7 on TNT.
That first time you take a step back.
I made that.
With your very own online store.
I sold that.
And you can manage it all in one place.
I built this.
And it was easy, with a partner that puts you first. GoDaddy.
If you're on Medicare, remember, the annual enrollment period is here. The time to choose your coverage begins October 15th and ends December 7th. So call United Healthcare and see how you can get more of what matters with our broad range of plans, including an AARP Medicare Advantage plan from United Healthcare. It can combine your hospital and doctor coverage with Part D prescription drug coverage and more, all in one simple plan. These plans are made to support your whole health with $0 annual physical exams, $0 lab tests, and $0 preventive care like mammograms and colonoscopies. And you'll get more for your Medicare dollar with $0 copays on most covered dental services, a $0 eye exam, and an allowance for eyewear, plus $0 copays on hundreds of prescriptions at the pharmacy or by mail. Now's the time to look at United Healthcare's variety of plans. So give us a call to learn more about coverage options in your area. With our Right Plan promise, you have our commitment to helping you find the right plan for your needs. And to help make life with Medicare simpler, you'll get the all-in-one member U-Card. Only from United Healthcare, the U-Card is your United Healthcare member ID and much more. Show your U-Card when you visit your primary care provider, dentist, or eye doctor, or fill a prescription at the pharmacy, and use it to access Medicare Advantage's largest national network of providers. You can count on United Healthcare to help you get the care you need when you need it. Enrollment ends December 7th. Now's the time to learn more about America's most chosen Medicare Advantage plans and how they can open doors to a simpler healthcare experience with the all-in-one U card. Call United Healthcare today about the only Medicare Advantage plans with the AARP name and get more of what matters to you.
Start your day with Nature Made, the #1 pharmacist-recommended vitamin and supplement brand.
Sure, you can get data everywhere, but you have to use it all the time. That's not really you. With TracFone, you can get great coverage all nationwide 5G for a lot less. Plans start at $15 a month, no contract. TracFone.
He hits his mark center stage and is crushed by a baby grand piano.
You're replacing me?
Customize and save with Liberty Liberty. He doesn't even have a mustache.
Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 Liberty.
Brenda used to worry about staying.
I went to the hospital Sunday. I was diagnosed with diverticulitis. They sent me home with medication. They said, take this. If it's not better in 48 hours, come back. I don't know if I'm getting better or worse. I sound worse, I know. Well, I don't know. Oh, still suffering and in pain. Oh. Speaker of the House. A song by Paul Beckman, Polly Rainbow song. Huh. Oh, created October 17th, 2023. Oh. Speaker of the House, Speaker of the House, Speaker of the House, Speaker of the House, Speaker, 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 the House of Representatives in the USA in 2023 is absent. It's without a Speaker, 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 Speaker of the House. For almost 2 weeks now. Eek, a mouse. Speaker, Speaker of the House. They're trying to elect a new one. They tried one, he didn't get it. Now the next newcomer's going. He's a Trump elected type. Trump supports him. Will he get it or not? He's part of the MAGA group. Tied Congress in a knot. Yeah, he supposedly was at the January 6th insurrection participating. He won't admit that Trump lost. He won't admit Biden won. Those are two things that some have done. Some are thinking, well now, look at the facts. What you doing, what you doing? Isn't that a laugh? You know, Trump lost. But if you want to be on his side, you gotta say he never did. If you're at the insurrection, weren't you part of the problem? Part of the trouble that instigated people dying, suffering, injured too, loss of security, police, destruction and mayhem. Well, Speaker, 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 Speaker of the House. Well, now everybody's as silent as a mouse. Speaker, 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 Speaker of the House. Come on, Republicans. Republican majority rules at this time, but they can't even elect a speaker. Shows how weak they are. Can't even elect a speaker. How weak they are. Ever since McCarthy got thrown out, now everybody's as silent as a mouse. Hey, 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 Speaker of the House. Hey, 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 Speaker of the House. Silent as a mouse. Well, he's gonna try his hat in the ring again. Let's see if he has any. Again. Maybe they should freeze the charm. Well, let's begin. I think the Democrats are gonna have a hard time with the current person trying to get the Speaker of the House. I think he's pretty conservative and he's not giving. Doesn't want to give any money, no funding at all, supposedly to Ukraine and their fight for democracy against Putin, against Russia, who's taken over a sovereign country when he could have. He's just a bully. Time's over. Well, now the new war front, Israel and Hamas. Well, we've got to jump. Don't want to have more fronts than just one that they got now. But the threat is once they start to do an incursion somehow, it's going to cause other nations or nations around there to want to go in and start attacking Israel from the air. 1 front, 2 front, 3 front, 4 front, 5. Well, that would be a really good size. Don't want to see that. Don't want to see that. If Israel's going to get anything at all, well, they got to fix the problem of the Speaker of the House. That's where all the money comes from now. Supposedly they're the ones who initiate it to happen. But nothing's gonna happen if there's no speaker happening. We're gonna try again. Gonna try again. Gonna try again. Gonna try again. Try again. Gonna try again. Gonna try again.